La di da di da. What is that? What is that?
Warning, the following program contains scenes of death.
Oh, Halloween, a time for merriment and scaryment. When a whole bunch of little pricks show up at your door wanting something for nothing, while chances are the parents are at home with their lights turned off, smoking a joint and fucking. But I guess if you're a Halloween hater, and you're looking for a bright side, and you're a psychopath, statistically, if you want to go kill someone, then walk around covered in blood, wearing a mask and carrying a bloodied knife without raising suspicion, well, it's the best time to do it. And me, I certainly ain't one to judge, because judging ain't my business. But what I am here to do on this Hallows Eve is take you through 7 stories of 7 grisly Halloweens.
7.
And I hope you enjoy it, because there's one thing for sure. Those on the receiving ends of these deadly Halloweens certainly didn't. So why don't you sit back, shut the fuck up, smoke 'em if you got 'em, and enjoy. Welcome to merry old England, the land of fish and chips, fucked up teeth, and women who still don't wax their pussies. I made that last part up just to be evocative and to get shadow banned by YouTube even worse. They wax their pussies just fine, believe me, I know. Although saying that, I'm guessing this broad doesn't, and I'm guessing that no one cares. But let's get on to more important things, like murder. Speaking of which, me one Lillian Armstrong. And by all accounts, Lillian didn't have an enemy in the world. But don't they always say that? At the end of the day, no one knows no one that well. The pretty 70-year-old confirmed bachelorette had dedicated her life to being a school principal. Did I say pretty? I was lying. But there's one thing for sure. If she were a school headmistress and principal, well, then she had more than one enemy. And I'm guessing that any one of her former pupils would have loved to stick the knife in. Recently retired, by all counts, Miss Armstrong was a devout Methodist, meaning she were a real God lover. After a day of shopping, I guess with her God, she was last seen around 6:30 p.m. by 2 children looking out of her window. Because every child knew that Miss Armstrong were generous with the candies, or sweets, as they are known as in England. But this year word spread fast that she wasn't so generous. In fact, this Halloween, Miss Armstrong didn't even bother answering the door. And I'm sure that more than one English kid called her a stupid, stingy bitch. Although I'm hypothesizing, and I can't say that for sure. It was the next day, after missing choir practice, that a concerned relative paid Miss Armstrong a visit. And when there was no answer at her door, she contacted the police. When police forced themselves into Lillian's house, they made a grim discovery. There she lay at the foot of the stairs, wearing her nightdress, with a nylon stocking tied and knotted tightly around her neck. She was covered head to toe in blood, and she'd been stabbed over 30 times in the face and in the head. She hadn't been sexually assaulted, there's a shocker, and nothing in the house was missing. And to this day, the crime remains unsolved. Her cousin figured it was a gang of mischievous teenagers who did it as a prank. But cops ignored that because she was obviously a mental. They figured it was a former student with an axe to grind. But if they had an axe to grind, if the coroner's report was to be believed, they grinded it good. Because Lillian Armstrong's brain had been stabbed so many times, it were virtually mince. Former detectives now say that there was blood all over the house, and they believe that not all the blood was Lillian Armstrong's. And if evidence has been properly preserved, they may be able to find out who the killer was. But until then, the case remains colder than a retard's tongue licking out an Eskimo woman's pussy. I guess it's safe to say that all families aren't the Brady Bunch. And when couples get divorced and remarry, often the integration of those two families don't run as smooth as you'd like it to run. Case in point, the divorced Bill Lesky had met Susan. They fell in love, got married, and he accepted her 2 children as his own. And they moved them all into his family home to be one loving unit, right? Well, not exactly. His teenage son, BJ, which I guess stands for blowjob, had problems with his new stepmother and stepbrother. And time after time, there were altercations and arguments, culminating in 2010 with BJ breaking into the bathroom when his stepmother was showering and attacking her. And by then she'd had enough, and she told her husband that his son, who had been named after pleasuring men orally, had to go, which I guess kinda sucked for the son. But I guess with a name like BJ, well, you get the idea. So BJ, knowing that he had to move out, decided that he'd do a little recreational hunting nearby with a friend before he went home and packed his bags. But not before having a conversation with his stepbrother Devin. Despite things, him and Devin had always got along. He asked Devin if he was going to be in. Devin said no, he had to go out for the night. A fact which seemed to please BJ. You see what I did there? It was then the teenager, named after oral sex, a form of pleasuring men, went out hunting. Returning at around 11 o'clock, he entered the home. He then executed his father, his stepmother, and his stepbrother.
New details now on William Liskey. He faced the judge this morning in Ottawa County Municipal Court. His bond set at $1 million. Liskey is charged with 1 count of murder. The 24-year-old is accused of...
The stepbrother, after returning home from his night out, played a couple hours of video games, fell asleep, and in the morning woke up to find his mother, his brother, and his stepfather dead in their beds.
The Halloween horror that still haunts the Houston area 40 years later.
To be a kid in the 1970s, well, it was a simpler time. No TikTok, no selfies. It wasn't the digital cesspool that it is today. It was an innocent, more naive time, and Halloween was part of that innocence. And it was no different for 8-year-old Timmy O'Brien. Each Halloween, he'd pull out his pillowcase and try to get as much candy as he could. And in 1974, Timmy would be dressing as the Wolfman, with his mother doing up his and his sister's costume, and the father taking him out. Ron O'Brien went out that night with Timmy and his younger sister, accompanied by a neighbor and their 2 kids, going door to door. On their route, they came across a house where the lights were out. But Mr. O'Brien insisted knocking anyway. Tired of waiting, the kids went ahead, accompanied by the father of the other 2 kids. It was about 2 minutes later that Mr. O'Brien caught up with the group, and he said the occupants of the house had finally answered. and he handed out some pixie sticks to everyone that he'd been given. And he was even left with a couple of extras. As the group continued to trick-or-treat, Mr. O'Brien saw a child who went to their family church, and he gave the kid a couple of those pixie sticks. It was just around this time that it started to rain, and both of the families returned to their homes. It was after the obligatory sorting out the useless fruit from the candy. The children asked for permission to go to their rooms and start eating that candy. But it was about 20 minutes later that Timmy would come out of his room complaining he was sick and start puking everywhere. His father would rush and grab him a glass of Kool-Aid. Timmy drank it, but he died right there on the floor in his father's arms. Diarrhea soaking through his pajamas, puke still coming out of his mouth, and his mother sobbing. When the ambulance got there, they told the parents there was nothing they could do. The kid was dead. Once they got Timmy back to the morgue, well, it was pretty clear to everyone involved. Someone had poisoned him. And by the mix of sugar in his system, it was obvious that it was the candy that had been poisoned. Death by candy. When cops told the parents what had happened and the young Timmy had been poisoned, well, they were distraught. How could someone want to poison a child? Cops told them that it was the pixie sticks that had killed the kid, and they needed to know from Mr. O'Brien where he got those pixie sticks. But obviously in shock, he said he couldn't remember. But when cops did some poking around, they found out that no one in the neighborhood had given out pixie sticks that night. Although several kids did have them, but couldn't remember where they got them. Except Timmy's sister. She'd remembered and said that her father had got them from a house with no lights. And all those pixie sticks that night, they had something in common. They all contained cyanide, and the neighborhood was shocked that there may be a killer amongst them, but no one more shocked than Mr. O'Brien. And when cops told him that no one in the area had been handing out pixie sticks, that's when he recounted his daughter's tale of going to a dark house that no one had answered at first. But eventually, someone stuck their arm out and handed him the fatal candy, but he hadn't seen her face. And when cops went to that house to question the occupant, turns out he wasn't even home, and he had an alibi that was tighter than the Velcro strap on a fork of a guy with MS at an all-you-can-eat salad bar. At the funeral, it seemed like half of the town showed up, and Mr. O'Brien, he gave a eulogy that had everyone in tears, with some saying it was the finest eulogy they'd ever heard. But I guess the Tex-Mex eating cops, they weren't impressed by good eulogies, because they arrested Ron O'Brien for the murder of his son. They'd found out that O'Brien was in debt to the tune of $100,000. The exact amount he took out on life insurance for his kid Timmy. Well, he took out 80. I guess he needed the extra 20 for folding cash.
Most of today's testimony came from Jimmy Bates, a close friend of the O'Brien family. Bates said that before Halloween, O'Brien asked if he could bring his children over to trick-or-treat with the Bates children on Halloween night. Both families ate dinner together, and then the fathers took the children trick-or-treating. Bates said O'Brien went to one house where no one appeared to be home, and after the children had scampered ahead to the next house, O'Brien came off the front porch carrying the pixie sticks. He gave the pixie sticks to the children and then later took them back and said he wanted to stop at his car for a moment. Bates said when O'Brien came back into the Bates house, he returned the pixie sticks to the children. Later that night, Timothy O'Brien died from eating a poisoned pixie stick.
Once in court, although O'Brien kept blubbering on about his innocence, the evidence was overwhelming, including a chemist friend who said he'd contacted him, wondering how much cyanide it would take to kill someone. A chemical supply salesman also testified that O'Brien inquired where he could buy cyanide. And the father, who became known as the Candy Man, or the man who killed Halloween, was sentenced to death by lethal injection.